Hello, and welcome to Bold Hearts, a production of the American Heart Association in Central Indiana, to highlight the great work being done to help Hoosiers live longer, healthier lives. I'm Annessa Chumbley, and I'm so excited to host this 5-part series where we will dive deeper into how the American Heart Association is impacting people in Indiana. We're going to provide you with tips and takeaways to help you and your loved ones live healthier. This is the 100th anniversary of the American Heart Association. So since 1924, the American Heart Association has been a leader in the fight against heart disease and stroke. They funded cutting-edge research and have been a part of discoveries such as new surgical techniques, new medical devices, and life-saving drugs. They've also been on the forefront of health education, helping people learn how to eat a healthier diet, how to exercise more, and how to reduce other risk factors for heart disease and stroke, such as diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, obesity, and smoking. They've been a leader in developing life-saving skills of CPR to save the lives of those experiencing sudden cardiac arrest. And they've done so much more over the course of that 100 years. Today, the American Heart Association focuses around 5 pillars. Those are women, addressing community need, ending e-cigarette and tobacco use, controlling blood pressure, and improving nutrition security. So this series will take a closer look at each of those pillars of work to learn more about what the American Heart Association is doing right here in Central Indiana. I'm excited because today we are talking all about women's heart health, and we're joined by Dr. Virginia Caine and Jessica Nickloy. Dr. Virginia Caine is a longtime volunteer with the American Heart Association. In addition, she's the director of the Marion County Public Health Department. Jessica is the CEO of the Etica Group and a past chair of the American Heart Association's Go Red for Women campaign. We have 2 fantastic women with us today, basically. So I'm so excited you both are here. In addition to this being the 100th anniversary of the American Heart Association, it's also the 20th anniversary of the iconic Go Red for Women. So Dr. Caine, let's kick it off with you. Give us some sort of a foundation. What is Go Red for Women?
So Go Red for Women is a great organization, primarily of women, but we got a lot of men too, who are out there really trying to do their community education and outreach about the importance of heart disease in our community. That we are, and we have to recognize that heart disease is the #1 killer of women, but also the #1 killer of men. And so a lot of people are not aware of that.
Yeah, that is shocking to hear. It's the #1 killer of women.
Yes.
And
most people think it's breast cancer, but
actually... that would have been my first thought, exactly.
Yeah, but actually, it is heart disease.
Has it increased recently?
We're seeing a substantial increase in our heart disease, unfortunately, every year. And I don't know if you look at the last couple of years, if the COVID pandemic had anything to do with it, because physical activity is so critical, as a risk factor in preventing heart disease. And, with all that epidemic and infection going around, a lot of people weren't outdoors as much or interacting as much as we had in the past.
Well, so this started 20 years ago, and it seems like the month of February, you kind of see that everywhere. I always like it, and there's actually a day devoted to this. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. We're going to talk about that coming up, but first let's talk about the signs of heart disease for women, because they're different. Especially for a heart attack, they're different. We kind of think of men, that traditional Hollywood, grab the chest, tingling of arm. Do I have that right?
Yes.
But it's different for women.
So it's different for women. So technically, the #1 symptom that people always equate with heart disease is that pressure or squeezing or tightness in my chest. Some people say, I feel like I got an elephant sitting on my chest. So it's the chest pain is what we equate with heart disease a lot. But in the case, for example, my mother had 2 heart attacks. And it wasn't until the second heart attack that we even realized she had heart disease. And in her case, she was atypical that we see with a lot of women. She only had jaw pain. And so with heart disease, you can have neck pain, you can have back pain, you can have abdominal pain. You may have what you call indigestion. but she only had jaw pain. That's all she had. But the other thing that we see with heart disease in women, you can have extreme fatigue. All of a sudden, she was just exhausted. And my mother was one of those go-getters. She's always active and physically around, but she was just exhausted. She had that fatigue. But along with her jaw pain, she had nausea, which we can see with heart disease and a heart attack. She didn't have vomiting, but that can occur. And she was perspiring profusely. So she was sweating significantly associated with her heart symptoms. And sometimes you can have shortness of breath associated with your symptoms and upset stomach.
Okay, so say one of our viewers is watching and they're thinking, that's my mom, or that's my sister, or she has a couple of those. When would you tell them to take their loved one to the hospital or try to get them help? How far in advance? When would they know that a heart attack is happening?
So let me just say that if you're having chest pain or you're having this jaw pain, and if it's lasting longer than 15 minutes or more, you really need to go to a emergency room or urgent care facility.
Okay.
Now, I can't tell you now, women, I know some of us have significant others, and we have brothers and whatever. Men are notorious, though, for saying, I'm just gonna lie down, and if I'm feeling bad tomorrow, I will go and see the doctor. No. If they're having symptoms of pain, whether it's neck pain or your jaw's hurting or chest pain, anyone, and if it's lasting longer than 15 minutes, you call 911, get the ambulance. It's always better. But if not, they need to get to an ER or urgent care facility.
Well, I appreciate that, even that time limit, because we wonder how long to let it go. Dr. Cain says 15 minutes.
So you know what the problem is that a lot of times people having heart attacks, they can have cardiac arrhythmias, where your heart is beating irregularly. And if your heart is beating irregularly, your heart pumps, that allows the blood to flow through the heart, but that blood's got to also go to your brain. So if you're having cardiac arrhythmias, that blood won't flow to your brain, and it could put you even at risk for a stroke, because of insufficient flow to the brain, and that can be significant. So that's why you can't sleep on this. You've got to get it checked out.
Go ahead and make that call. That's right.
So I want to add to that. What I've noticed, especially my mother, for instance, comes on more like anxiety. Comes on like an anxiety attack where she feels like she's running constantly and needs to move and can't sit still, which is where we have taken her in. And I'm like, we are not sitting here waiting on this. Let's go. And she had been in atrial fib, which can then lead to other problems. And so for her, it attacks more like an anxiety. There is no pressure of the chest or anything like that, but she does feel like
so a lot of times they get that
jittery,
that fluttering of their heart because of the fluttering of the heart. Some people call it heart palpitations.
Yes.
And then some people think they can feel like it's impending death. Something that's not right. Something bad is about to happen to me.
So it's almost like an anxiety attack for them, but it comes in that
was
form.
A great description because it is so different for women. I know you both have your own short stories to share. We're looking forward to that, and we will get to it right when we come back. So what we've learned is heart disease affects 1 in every 3 women. So that means almost all of us are either personally affected by heart disease or we know a woman who is, probably one that we love very much. When we return, we are going to get the personal stories of both of these women. So stick around. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back to Bold Hearts, one of a 5-part series by the American Heart Association to celebrate its 100th anniversary and help Hoosiers live longer, healthier lives. Today, we're focusing on women's heart health, and I'm joined by Dr. Virginia Caine and Jessica Nickloy, who are both volunteers with the American Heart Association's Go Red for Women movement. Okay, I'm really excited about this. Jessica, let's start with you. You've got a personal story with heart disease.
I do. It all started when I was pregnant. We became pregnant after a little bit of help with our twins, who are now 20, but I developed preeclampsia through the pregnancy.
And would you explain what that is for those people that don't know?
So preeclampsia is basically when you're pregnant, your blood pressure will spike up. It causes the babies to be a little bit tinier. It constricts your blood flow to both you and to the babies.
It's serious stuff.
It is, especially if you're not monitoring it. I was placed on bed rest about 26 weeks into the pregnancy.
Wow.
And then they were born at 35 weeks. So when I'm talking bed rest, we're talking I get out of bed, I could shower, go downstairs. We had a 2-story house, go downstairs, go to the couch. And then my next flight up the stairs was when I was ready for bed. So I was downstairs a lot. So I had them. Everything was fine at the birth. My blood pressure was a little elevated, which is what sent me into labor, actually. We had them. It was fine. Fast forward about 6.5 years later, we have our middle child. I developed preeclampsia again at about the 26th week, was placed on bed rest and with her. At this time, I have 6.5-year-old kindergartners.
Oh my!
And pregnant. But with her, it got a little bit different. The blood pressure seemed to get a little bit higher, a lot faster. I was placed on that bed rest. Same thing. Had to come down the stairs and not go back upstairs. Really watch my activity. Pretty much lay on the couch to be as stable as possible.
At that point, was it discouraging for you, or were you like, I've got this down, I know what I'm doing?
I thought I had it down. And then we went into labor, and I had her. It was a very easy labor. Had her, and my blood pressure was high again, which is what sent me into labor. She was born at 38 weeks. But then after that, it was after the birth, my blood pressure was still high. They monitored me in the hospital. And I have a great OB. She has been with us ever since the beginning. But they monitored us and ended up sending us home because we thought we had it under control. And about 3 days later, I remember going home on a Wednesday, but by Friday, I kind of went home with a slight headache, which is where we were talking about signs. I had this slight headache, and by that Friday, I remember laying on the couch, and I believe it was my mom that was there. It was spring break for our kindergartners, and just laying there saying, I don't feel well, something's not right. And they had told us to monitor my blood pressure while I was at home. And so my husband actually I remember him taking my blood pressure. And this is kind of where it gets fuzzy because I had such a massive headache that nothing was really making sense at the time. But when he took my blood pressure, it was 180 over like 120 at the time. He waited about 30 minutes and took it again, and it just kept increasing each time he took it. So he called our OB, and they said to bring me in, bring in the baby right away. So they admitted us back into labor and delivery. And by the time I got back to the hospital and they took my blood pressure again, I was at 200.
Wow.
I was at stroke level. So they were quickly administering what felt like probably 6 different kinds of blood pressure medicines at that time, trying to get my blood pressure to come down. So what developed was post-eclampsia. So it's the same thing as preeclampsia, but after the birth, where it just won't relax and your blood pressure won't come down. So I was put on blood pressure medicines then again, and when I left the hospital about 3 days later, I still had what I would consider now a slight headache, but the blood pressure was so high that it made a massive migraine. I was on 2 different kinds of blood pressure medicines until about 12 weeks postpartum. And then I went down to 1 and then kind of weaned myself off. We have our 4th child now. I was actually advised not to have any more children.
Okay.
Things happen. We have a 4th child. Yeah. Wonderful blessing.
You were blessed? Yes.
Wonderful blessing, our only son. But by the time we realized I was pregnant, I took a home pregnancy test on a Friday. They confirmed it with a blood test. We had an appointment the following Tuesday. My blood pressure was already high.
Whoa.
Wow.
So they automatically put me on blood pressure
and
medicine.
I didn't know it could last that long. You know, maternal health has so many complexities. The good news is recently, tell me about the Medicaid expansion that happened in 2022. Because this is an important point.
So it went from a couple weeks to now a full year to make sure that we have that postpartum coverage.
Because things can happen. And,
it can.
And how long after your birth did that?
So with Meredith,
post-eclampsia?
our now 13-year-old, I was on that medicine for a good year and was able to wean myself off. But after our fourth child here, I am still on blood pressure medicine. I cannot come off of it. We've tried to take me off. My blood pressure skyrockets, and so I have to go back on it.
So 50% of the women who are pregnant and have high blood pressure after the delivery of their child are at higher risk for having permanent high blood pressure than if they never had blood pressure during their pregnancy. So you are at higher risk for having high blood pressure where you may require medications forever.
Right. And I had very great doctors. After my last 2 pregnancies, they had me do stress tests on my heart to make sure there was actually no damage to my heart. Both came out fine, but I have to get checked now because I'm on blood pressure medicine consistently. I have to go in every 6 months, get blood work done now to make sure my kidneys are working properly. Like, it's not just during that pregnancy, it continues on. And so you have to make sure you're doing follow-ups and continuing your health.
It sounds like, Jessica, that's what gave you a heart for this. And we're glad, and thank you for sharing your story. And congratulations on the 4. I know they've got to keep you busy. She's a professional working mom that does so much. Dr. Caine, we're going to get to your story right when we come back. And so everybody stay with us. Those insights were amazing. The American Heart Association is working on policy efforts to address maternal health, and they continue to work with organizations throughout Central Indiana to address women's health needs in terms of prevention and treatment. So we're going to come back with the 8 essential tips for healthy living, like what we can do about all this that help women and men live longer, healthier lives. Stay with us. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back, everyone, to Bold Hearts, one of a 5-part series by the American Heart Association to celebrate its 100th anniversary to help Hoosiers live longer and healthier lives. So today, like I've mentioned, we're focusing on women's heart health. And I'm still joined by Dr. Caine and Jessica. This has been so wonderful, such great information. I want to get to your story, Dr. Caine.
So I'll tell you I have a sister, younger, lives in Arkansas, and she called me, I want to say about 9 o'clock at night, and she was just, you could tell that there was something not right on the phone, and she just says, wow, it's real dark here in the house, and normally we have a lot of thunderstorms and tornadoes, but she said she had read the weather, and everything was fine, so she wondered why the electricity was out in her block, and I said, well, don't worry about it. Let me just call our neighbor across the street, and maybe he can tell us why everything is dark in the house. So I called my neighbor across the street, and he's looking out the window. He says, I can see lights into your house in your living room area, and all the lights are on. There's no electricity. It's out. And I says, oh, my God. Then that told me she's blind for whatever reason. And so I said, I need you to just stay there. We're going to call the ambulance and get you seen. So ambulance arrived and carried her to the emergency room. And the emergency room, so this is the problem when you sometimes in a small community, you can't always get your specialist out to see her. And she's totally blind, but the ER doctor says, I can't get the ophthalmologist to come out and see her. I say, you got to be kidding me. Mm-hmm. And then they did the CT scan of her head to just make sure she hadn't had a stroke or anything. And I can't tell anything, the ER doctor says, but these films are read down in India, so I won't have the official results until the next day. And I said, well, that's okay. So by that time, I took an early flight, 6 in the morning. I was there in Arkansas by 8 o'clock. I had to drive an hour to my hometown to pick her up. And then I brought her back to the University of Arkansas Medical Center. But now instead of going to the ER, because, it takes a long wait, I just called the neurology department, and said, hey, I'm Dr. Caine. I need to have my sister seen in clinic right away. Well, come on, Dr. Caine. They assumed that I was on the faculty at University of Arkansas.
Nice. Okay.
So they walked us right in. And of course, able to determine that she indeed they did emergency MRIs and CAT scans. She did have a stroke, and she was totally blind. But we found out, because we were aware she had a congenital heart condition, but we were always told it was benign, it was harmless. And in fact, it was not a harmless congenital heart condition, that she should have had surgery as a young child.
Wow.
And so she had a blood clot come through that heart valve that not only went to her brain, where she lost her eyesight, but it also went to her kidneys. So she was also in kidney failure. We didn't realize it at that time, but her blood pressure was up as well, sky high.
Did she get her eyesight back?
So she was totally blind from June the 21st, totally blind, until October the 21st, totally blind. She's a college professor. She was kind of angry, very upset about this. The doctors were telling her she would never get her sight back. She needed to learn Braille. She refused. And so I go to all her visits in Arkansas. So we had just got back from the visit in Arkansas. She had been fidgety the night before. She just couldn't get comfortable. And I was fixing her food, and I came back to bring her plate. She says, "Are you wearing something red?" And I was wearing a red jacket, and I literally dropped my plate. That's the first time she was able to distinguish color.
Wow.
October the 21st. And so she could make out a nose, but she couldn't distinguish her face, not until right after Christmas.
Okay.
Where she regained her sight back.
Okay. Praise God. That's amazing. Can I just say, for anybody out there that these stories resonate with them, or maybe they have a loved one that they've been wondering about, let's end. We've only got about a minute, but with the practical tips on what we can do, can you give us that essential 8 that the American Heart Association has developed?
Let me just say the number one thing, if you are a smoker, quit smoking.
Okay.
So that's the number one thing. 2, it's always very important. Nutrition, and I think you as a background for your nutrition know, fruits and vegetables are important, but even fish. Twice a week, those omega amino acids are really critical.
Brain, heart, eyes.
Yes,
that's what we think of when we think of omega-3s.
But physical activity, you got to do at least 150 minutes of activity per week. If you can't do that, 75 minutes of vigorous activity, and you don't have to do it all at one time. Weight is really important. So you need to have that ideal weight, body mass index. We ask that you calculate it between 18.5 and 25. But the other thing people forget about a lot is you need to get plenty of sleep.
Sleep, everyone.
If you don't get 7 to 8 hours of sleep, it increases your risk significantly for heart disease, but even puts you at real risk for developing diabetes. So get your blood sugar checked.
Yes.
Know whether you have diabetes or not. And any other tips?
You heard it from the doctor herself. That was a lot of great information. Unfortunately, we have to go. I could stay here for much longer and listen to you both talk, but I think it says something when we educate ourselves. I have learned so much today, and my mom's been a nurse for 30 years, so there's always something where we can learn, but those personal stories are so impactful. So thank you both for being vulnerable and sharing those, because I'm sure we've helped so many people.
Get your blood pressure checked, too.
Blood pressure. She's going to keep going.
I would tell people to listen to their bodies.
Great advice. Make sure you go to mylifecheck.heart.org to get more information. And don't forget, today's show is one of a 5-part series about the American Heart Association's work here in Central Indiana. Here's what you're going to do. Scan the QR code on the screen. If you don't know how to do that, just bring up your phone's camera, hover over that QR code, and then click that link. And you're going to find the other 4 episodes on the association's Midwest Region YouTube page. I'd love to have you watch those. If you'd like to learn more about what the American Heart Association is doing in Central Indiana to help people live longer and healthier lives, just visit their website at heart.org/Indianapolis. You can also follow them on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter X, whichever one you're calling it, with the handle at AHA Indiana. Thank you so much again for joining us. You have a great day.